Oh, welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm going to show you figure that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Welcome in, everybody. Hope you're having a wonderful Wednesday so far, and if it's been a crappy Wednesday, and it does happen from time to time, sometimes we wake up in the morning and we're not feeling like P. Diddy. Well, actually, that's a good thing. Who did that? That was Kesha. Wake up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy. Who can we replace that with? Ray Diddy. Yeah, Ray Didinger. How about we do wake up in the morning feeling like Ray Diddy? I like that better. Okay. If you didn't wake up in the morning feeling like Ray Diddy, welcome into the show. Today might turn around for you. I have no idea. I can't promise you things in this life. I can't promise you those things in life. I can certainly promise you that we will have a little bit of fun here for the next roughly hour as we dive into what's going on with the Philadelphia 76ers, the Philadelphia Phillies, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Philadelphia Eagles. There's so much going on, and I honestly am at a point right now where it feels like there is just nonstop news happening. And hey, we just got news in the last hour, and so we're going to go over to this really quickly. This was not part of the initial rundown, but while the league is currently seeing a ton of releases, Mekhi Becton, who we have talked about previously on the show, according to Jeremy Fowler, Mekhi Becton is expected to be officially released by the Chargers. Now, you know me, I was a big Mekhi Becton fan when he was here. That man opened up some massive holes. He is a massive human being. And as this Eagles team tries to figure out what the hell they're going to do to rebound from a brutal season last year, health-wise on the offensive line, and knowing damn well that Landon Dickerson feels like his career is always kind of up in the air from a health perspective, I'd bring back Mekhi Becton. Now, does he fit Mannion's system? I don't know. We know that it worked really well under Jeff Stoutland. We know that Becton didn't have a ton of success when he was playing for the Jets. We know that he didn't have a very good season last year for the Chargers, where he also had some injuries. But Chargers are going to release him. And it's a guy who at least knows your team, knows your organization, knows everything about how to be a Philadelphia Eagle, how to perform in Philadelphia. Yes, the system has changed. Yes, the offensive coordinator is different. Yes, the run blocking concepts are going to be different under Sean Mannion versus what they were under. Well, let's see. He didn't play under Kevin Patullo. He played under, what's his nuts? I can see him. Kellen Moore. So it's different now, right? He's not playing in Kellen Moore's system, but he did avoid the absolute disaster that was the Kevin Patullo offense. So if it were me and I were Howie Roseman, I would at least have a conversation. And by the way, based on his performance last year, I tend to believe there are not going to be a ton of interested parties. There are not going to be a ton of teams that are going to look to actively go after Mekhi Becton. And if that is the case, maybe you can get him on a short-term deal. Like maybe it's another one-year prove-it deal. And that kind of helps you figure out, one, can Becton play in this system? And two, it gives you a little bit of insurance in case Dickerson gets hurt again, or in case you have some other holes on the offensive line. And remember, it was Stoutland who came up with the idea of moving Becton inside to guard. I do wonder, knowing that Lane Johnson has very few years left, right? Like, there were retirement rumors last year, and then this offseason, there have been retirement rumors, and he's coming back, and we know that he's coming back. But do you bring Mekhi Becton in and see what that looks like? Him playing guard, but then also maybe can he play tackle? And if and when Lane Johnson needs a breather, can you put Mekhi Becton in as right tackle and see what that looks like? I wouldn't be opposed to it. To me, it's a pretty simple sell. Now, if this offensive coordinator and the new run game coordinator, if they believe Becton can't work, well then fine. But man, I was like a given commodity. And you never know how someone's going to perform. Now, unless there were issues in the locker room that we're unaware of, if you do remember, there was that Instagram story of a woman who claimed to be a baby mama of Mekhi Becton, who also put up pictures of his stained underwear, and there were some accusations of drug usage, which we obviously hope isn't true. But if you can get past all that, yeah, I'd like to have Mekhi Becton back. Why not? Give him a year. Let's see what it looks like. All right, so that just came through. And, I guess we'll continue with the Eagles theme here for a second, and then we'll get out to the comments. But there's this really weird thing kind of going on right now with the Eagles as well, where Dallas Goedert, it felt like he was going to be moved, and there were rumors coming out that the Eagles were going to look to move on from Goedert. But there are a couple of things that got sort of weird around it, and most notably, if Goedert leaves and signs elsewhere, there could be a lot of dead cap for the Eagles, which gives them added incentive to make sure they bring him back. Now, if I remember correctly, and I'm 99% sure of this, right? Here we go. I'll pull up Jeff McClain's tweet from yesterday, and then I'll give you the Garofolo tweet that makes me think that there's a non-zero chance they try to bring back Dallas Goedert. This is something that Jeff McClain put out yesterday about Goedert and about how bad things could get if he ultimately does leave. And the Eagles are in a weird spot where, I think conceptually they'd want to bring him back. He's a hell of a weapon for them. He's vital to their success. But this was the Jeff McClain tweet yesterday. Because he put, here's the original tweet. Just as a clarification, as Jake Rosenberg said, the Eagles pushed the void back to post-June 1st, so the $20 million can be spread over the next 2 years, so it's not all in 2026, but still some additional reason to negotiate his return. So the idea is that the Eagles would have $20 million in dead money if Goedert signs with another team. And so then McClain put out another clarifying tweet on his original tweet, or on his second tweet. One last time, original tweet stands. Eagles will be on the hook for $20 million in dead cap money in 2026 if Goedert signs elsewhere. The void isn't post-June 1st. An NFL source confirms this recent clarification. Sorry for the confusion. Point remains, Eagles could have additional reason to negotiate a return as there won't be a clean break with an unrestricted free agent. So if the Eagles are going to be on the hook for $20 million, if he leaves, just if he leaves, why wouldn't you bring him back? Why wouldn't you try to figure out a contract that makes sense for the team and the player? Now, if you're Dallas Goedert, do you feel like you're not utilized enough in this offense? Do you feel like you need to go somewhere else and kind of pad your own stats? You already have the Super Bowl. Does he feel like he needs to go somewhere else and rack up some stats and get an even bigger payday? Like maybe the Eagles having $20 million in dead cap does not affect Dallas Goedert. Has no bearing on where Dallas Goedert signs. He doesn't need to feel a level of loyalty and take a bad deal from the Eagles, right? And at the same time, if you're Howie Roseman, this has to scare you at least a little bit. Like, the Eagles have been really good about moving money around, and we often talk about the fact that, like, if things were to ever go sideways, if you ever had to release any of these guys that you've kind of punted some money down the road for, the cap ramifications are going to be disastrous. Now, I want to get over to Mike Garofolo, who obviously covers the league at a national level. So Garofolo tweets out, with less than a week to the start of the negotiating window, Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert is positioned to hit free agency for the first time in his career. Sources say the team has expressed re-signing him, and the sides will continue talking in coming days. However, Howie Roseman has a few balls in the air, like A.J. Brown, that are affecting budgeting for his pending free agents. There are some moving parts that could change on a few fronts in the next few days. If he gets to the market, Goedert will have significant interest from other teams interested in the proven, reliable 8-year veteran who had career highs with 60 catches and 11 touchdowns last season. So, this A.J. Brown thing, right? I feel like this has been the talk ever since midway through last season about would he want to stay? Does he want to go? Does he hate Gavin Patullo? Does he hate Nick Sirianni? People dissecting the video of him and Sirianni in the tunnel, right, where Sirianni's chirping at the camera and A.J. Brown kind of like smirks and sort of rolls his eyes. And you get all the reports after the season that he apparently had requested a trade multiple times. You get people who go on the radio and they're 100% convinced that A.J. Brown needs to leave. And then you get people who say he has to go. I don't care how good he is. He has to go. They're going to be better off without him, which is insane. If A.J. Brown's coming back, and it seems like he's coming back, and Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni have given you every indication he's coming back, and some of A.J. Brown's teammates very clearly publicly seem to believe he's coming back. If all of that is true, Well, then I don't understand what the ball in the air is with A.J. Brown. Now, the Eagles do have holes to fill on this team, which is why I think that Mekhi Becton makes a lot of sense if he's a low cap hit and if he's a guy who is going to come in on like a 1-year deal. That fills a hole. That certainly helps your offensive line. You have some guys on the other side of the ball. I worry about Nakobe Dean. It seems like Nakobe Dean is probably a foregone conclusion that he'll be leaving, which kind of sucks. I like Nakobe Dean a lot. But like Dallas Goedert to me is a critical piece of this offense. He's a critical piece to what you have been able to do offensively. If you lose him, you don't have an heir apparent. Cal Katera is not an heir apparent at all. Free agent options, there may be one or two that are kind of notable. None of them are exceptional, and I wouldn't say that any of them eclipse what Goedert can do for you. You already know with Goedert that he can perform here. I mean, I know that I brought this up about Becton, but like there is a significant concern. There has to be. Can a guy who played for another team, another organization, in another system, right, who has not played in Philadelphia, who does not understand the stress and the pressure of playing in Philadelphia, can that guy find the same level of success playing here? And the answer could be yes. It is possible that a guy who comes in from outside the organization could come in here and stand up to the pressure of playing here for this fan base, can push back against fans who boo. Sure, anything is possible. But man, my level of concern would grow exponentially if they let Goedert leave. You have $20 million in dead cap. That sucks. You then have to go out and find a replacement. You're going to draft someone? I mean, if you're going to draft a tight end, you're not going to use your first-round pick on that. I can't imagine you would. That seems kind of insane. You desperately need an edge rusher. You've got to make sure that Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter are happy long-term. And that helps to clog up the interior line on the defensive line. You feel good about your linebackers. You feel good about Jahad Campbell. You certainly feel very good about Zach Bond. You're going to need a safety, assuming they let Blankenship leave. You've got your corners locked down. But are you going to use a first-round pick on a tight end? Like, I can't imagine that you would. That seems absolutely insane to me. Why on earth would you run the risk, right? Why would you ever want to run the risk of having your tight end position that's so critical in this offense, and I assume is going to be critical in Mannion's offense? Why would you allow things to go to chance? I wouldn't. All right, I'm going to go out to the comments. Then we got to get off the Eagles. We have to talk about the Sixers. We still got the Phillies. We still got the Flyers. Okay. Because I don't know if you know this or not, but the NHL trade deadline's on Friday. Nick Abe was so excited about being here today for a 10 o'clock show. He was here at 8:39 a.m. and said, "Am I early?" Yes, you were. Chris Reed says, how did the Spurs become NBA title contenders before the Sixers? They've got Wemby. Though Wemby's been hurt too. They also have Dylan Harper, who's fantastic, and we love VJ Edgecombe. Dylan Harper's fantastic. They have more role players that are useful. They don't have a GM who traded away the potential rookie of the year from a season ago who's been scoring 20 points per game, or nearly 20 points per game, off the bench for the reigning NBA champions. Didn't lie to the media and say that you sold high. Yeah, that's part of how San Antonio got ahead. Chris Reed says, I went to the Sixers-Spurs game December 2015 when the Spurs won 119-68. I remember giving Boban Marjanovic, who was having a great game against the Sixers, a standing ovation. Not much has changed. I think I'm back. I have no idea what happened. My computer crashed. Chrome crashed. I don't know why. Let me make sure that everything is still on the up and up. You guys have to let me know if you can still hear me and if you can see me. I've never had that happen before. In the history of this here program, I've never had that happen before. DS, I think you're right. Kevin Hayes' fingerprints are all over this. I have no idea. I've never had that happen before. Billy Morrison says, this is like the final Sopranos episode. Sorry, guys. I don't know what happened. I've been fighting with my computer here for about 2 weeks. If you have a Mac and you ever look at storage, you can see there's like a whole thing about system data. Like more than half of my hard drive was filled up with whatever system data is. And I think I finally figured it out. It's like old episodes of these shows, and they go to iCloud and then they come back down. Anyway, I've been trying to clear files out, and I started using a program that's supposed to like clear out all kinds of stuff on the computer, and it's been working better. But I got this weird notification from my computer about 2 minutes before that happened saying that there might be some issues with Chrome. And there you go. It just kind of died. So great stuff. Anyway, where the hell were we? What were we even talking about? I'm trying to remember. I'm at a total loss. I can't think of the last time something like that happened on this here program. Okay. Let's bring it back. We were talking about yeah, I lost it. I got no clue. I don't know where we were. Oh, we were talking about the Sixers. We were talking about the Sixers and the Spurs. I miss Boban. Boban made me smile. Do you remember how there was like the Bobby and Toby thing, right? There's Boban Marjanovic and Tobias Harris, and they were best buds. I remember that. Those felt like simpler times. They do. All right, let's see. Greg Pondereco says, just when I got used to Russ Joy afternoon shows. No. We've been doing this 10 a.m. thing, and I think it works. I do. I think that like overall it's been working. And I'll tell you what, one of the wildest things that's happened is the subscriber number, which I brought up a while ago. That's been gaining very strongly. So I guess I have to give a shout out to each and every one of you. Hopefully you're going out of your way in your life, give a little nod, a little tip of the cap. You say, hey, you want to go listen to some regular jamoke talk about Philadelphia sports? Go check out the Russ Joy Show, and I thank you. I do. I appreciate it. Okay. Let's see. Chris Freed says, if a U.S. sub can sink an enemy warship for the first time since 1945, the Sixers can build a champion, just not with this ownership or front office. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can get into what happened last night. I think so. D.D. Skinner says, morning, freaking hell yeah, hump day. A lot of positives there. Adam Glicka says, Russ, right here, Dad. I don't know what that means, but thank you. Hello, Adam. Let's see. There was some other stuff here I saw around. Here, Ford says, the Sixers team is done. It would almost be better to truly hate them, but they do have likable guys like Maxey and VJ. Yes, that is correct. I do see some questions in here about the Flyers. We'll get to those a little bit later on. Okay, so let's have a conversation about what happened with the Sixers. There's one thing that we need to note after last night, okay? The Sixers got mollywopped. They got dog-wopped. They got bamboozled, bombarded, nailed, smashed by the San Antonio Spurs at home. And this will come as no surprise. Joel Embiid missed this game because he's now got another injury, the strained oblique. And the Sixers had the ability earlier in the season to stem the tide. And like when they would lose Joel Embiid early in the season, Maxey and Edgecombe and Paul George, when he wasn't suspended, they would be able to figure out how to still win some games. And Jared McCain would occasionally pop in, but, Jared McCain's a totally worthless, useless player that Daryl Morey sold high on, allegedly, apparently. Moron. And that Nick Nurse couldn't figure out how to use. Moron. So you look at last night's game. I just want to give you a little rundown of how things went. I just got another notification that I think Chrome's going to crash again. I have no idea what. Hold on. I gotta figure this out. This actually has me kind of angry now. Hold on. We're gonna delete. I have no idea what I'm deleting at this point. We're gonna delete that. Yep. Let's delete this. Yep. All right. We're just gonna delete all kinds of stuff. Hold on. What could possibly go wrong? Everything could go wrong. All right, we're gonna give this a go. All right. We're gonna find out here in a second if the computer crashes again or not. And in the meantime, I'm gonna be very angry that this is happening again. Okay. So here's the long and short of what happened in Philadelphia. Okay. Sixers lose, and I've been giving VJ Edgecombe a ton of credit lately, for the way that he stepped up and the way that he stepped forward for this Sixers team, especially since Paul George got suspended, right? And he attempted 9 shots on the night, and he got hurt. And that obviously cut his night short. But in 20 minutes of play, he had 6 points. That won't get it done. Andre Drummond, supposed to be your big man who can back up Joel Embiid and hopefully keep this team afloat. 2 points. 1 of 7 from the field. A mere 3 rebounds. Tyrese Maxey, 21 points on 8 of 19, 2 of 6 from beyond the arc. To go with 8 rebounds, he led the team. Little Tyrese Maxey led the team in rebounding with 8. I mean, what are we doing, guys? What are we doing? And you may notice that there's somebody that I didn't include in that. The guy that I didn't include is Quentin Grimes. Now, I don't know if you remember this or not, but this past offseason, there was a whole big thing about how the Sixers needed to figure out a way to bring back Quentin Grimes. And that following Jared McCain's knee injury last year, they couldn't possibly survive. They couldn't possibly last without having Quentin Grimes as part of their future. How'd that go? Quentin Grimes last night, 2 points, 1 of 5 from the field, 0 for 2 from beyond the arc, 22 points. And I guarantee you that if we dive in, if we actually did a bit of a deep dive into Quentin Grimes so far this season, you'd want to light your hair on fire. And then you would further question why the fuck Daryl Morey, resident jackass, thought it was a good idea to move off of Jared McCain. Quentin Grimes so far this season averaging 12.4 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists. In his last 10 games, Quentin Grimes is averaging 10.1 points per game. He's shooting just under 39% from beyond the arc, 46% from the field. Is that good enough? No. The answer is no. And if you remember, a big part of why I was so angry with the McCain trade when it happened was that it depleted your guard depth. Yeah, McCain wasn't lighting the world on fire for the Sixers when he was here earlier in the season. Nick Nurse could not figure out a way to utilize the guy, and he looked significantly slower. He looked like a guy who was coming off of a knee injury. He's looking like a guy who maybe didn't have the conditioning that he needed. But they dealt Jared McCain. They also dealt Gordon, who didn't matter. But they dealt Jared McCain. And then when you lose a VJ Edgecombe to injury, and you look to Quentin Grimes to try to fill in the void, and he goes 1 of 5 from the field, that's not good enough. Cam Payne, who the U.S. brought, or the Sixers brought back to the U.S. from playing abroad, had 10 points, attempted 11 shots from the field, went 2 of 8 from downtown. Now, do I want to see Cam Payne attempting 8 shots from beyond the arc? No, I don't. But at least somebody had the balls enough to shoot. What are we doing here? By the way, this is also where I get so frustrated, like on the short-sightedness of the McCain trade, and Daryl Morey being a jackass who said that he sold high on McCain. Quentin Grimes, who had a good year for the Sixers last year, he's a free agent coming up. He's going to command a relatively large salary, one that was so relatively large you didn't feel like meeting it this past offseason, and it led to you almost having to let Grimes walk or to deal him away. So they're going to have to splash significant cash on Quentin Grimes to keep him, or they're going to let him walk. And they had a guy who was on a rookie contract who they could have very easily kept in Jared McCain. But because this ownership group, for whatever reason, is so afraid of the luxury tax, will not spend into the luxury tax, they had to trade away Jared McCain, who was on track to be the Rookie of the Year a year ago. Now, you might just be thinking to yourself, Russ, you're a total dope, you're a dweebazoid, you're a fool. A lot of that's true. I'll admit it. I will note one other thing to you. Jared McCain this season was okay. He wasn't great. He wasn't great when he was playing for the Sixers, but he was good. He was good enough. Since he has gone on to play in Oklahoma City, he has lit the world on fire. And we have to give him a ton of credit because it would have been easy to lose his confidence. It would have been easy for him to go from being a guy who was so heavily relied on with the Sixers a season ago to being a guy who feels like a total or felt like a total afterthought early this season. But McCain has effectively lit it up really well for the Thunder, the reigning NBA champions. Let's just take a look at some splits here really quick when it comes to young Jared McCain. And you'll, I think, have a better idea of why it gets so frustrating to see things fall apart the way that they have. Okay. Let's just for a second, let's just dive into it. Okay. Shall we? Let's shall. Okay. Jared McCain on the season. We have to do, where are we at? That's not the splits that I want. Let's go to this one. Yes. Okay. McCain played in 37 games for the Sixers this year. 37 games. He averaged just under 17 minutes per game, and he averaged 6.6 points per game. He then goes on to Oklahoma City, the number one team in the league, the reigning NBA champions, and a team that has figured out a way to utilize him. He's playing just under 20 minutes, and he's nearly doubled his point production to 12.5 points per game. Not only that, he's shooting 49% from the field, which is up from 38.5% with the Sixers. He is shooting 44% from beyond the arc, which is up from 37.8% with the Sixers. Now, you can make an argument if you really want to. If you're insane enough and you want to try to make the argument, you can, and I will allow you. You could make the case that what we could be seeing right now is what happens when a head coach has a legitimate idea of how to use a player. And it certainly feels like that is where we are at when you look at Nick Nurse versus the Thunder coach. Oklahoma City has figured out a way to make the most out of Jared McCain's minutes. Nick Nurse couldn't figure out a way to scheme it. Cool. Love that. Love that for us. Love that for the Sixers. Excellent stuff. Great job, everybody. High fives and handshakes all around. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Russ, numbers are numbers. Couldn't have affected the locker room that much, right? The move to get rid of Jared McCain, couldn't have had so much to do with why the Sixers have fallen apart, right? Right? Wrong. Yeah, very clearly, very, very clearly, the Sixers are still upset about Jared McCain being dealt. How do I know? Well, because young Tyrese Maxey went up to the podium last night, and he effectively said that they miss their friend, they miss their brother, Jared McCain. All right, so here we go. Here's Tyrese Maxey. Here's your leader, right? Joel Embiid's out of the lineup. Here's your all-star starter, a guy who's probably going to make an all-NBA team this year. Here's Tyrese Maxey on the morale of the team since the deadline and the decision to move on from Jared McCain.
A little bit. We just won 3 straight games, though. So it's like, I ain't about to, just harp on it too bad. You know, it was tough. We lost however many straight. Then we won 3 straight. Now we lost 2 straight. I mean, it's the NBA. I mean, it is what it is. It's hard. Definitely, trade deadline was difficult. And
trade deadline was difficult. Remember, Joel Embiid before the trade deadline said, I know that we usually like to avoid the tax, but I really hope we add this year. We got a really good team. Daryl Morey fired Jared McCain into the sun. Okay.
It's life, but we moved on from it, and that's something that we have to put in our rearview mirror. If we're going to sit there and dwell on the trade deadline now, I think that was 3-4 weeks ago, however long ago it was, that ain't going to get us nowhere.
That is true.
Have you noticed teammates dwelling on trade deadline and losing Jared?
I don't think so. I don't think we're dwelling on it. I mean, Jared was a close friend of ours, great teammate, great person. So I definitely think we miss him, of course. I mean, I ain't going to lie, say I don't miss Jared. But I'm happy for him. I watch him. OKC, make sure I hope he does well every single night that he plays. So when he plays us, of course, you know what I'm saying? But That is not like this is a business at the end of the day.
He's trying to be nice about this, right? And you got to give kudos to Maxey for trying to do the right thing here, not flaming the organization. There's one thing when you have a teammate that you're not fond of and you're trying to say nicely, try to put it in a nice way that, oh yeah, he was a good teammate. This is clearly weighing on these guys.
Being a part of, I've seen many people traded. I don't want to get traded, and whatever the case may be. People left in free agency. That you can't dwell on that. You know what I'm saying? You got to focus on the people that's in this building.
That is true.
These are the people that you're going to be with for the rest of the season. If they bring somebody else in, whatever the case may be, but these are the people that's going to be with you for the rest of this season and the rest of this stretch run. If you want to try to make a run at doing something special, then you got to focus on that. And that's what I think we're still focused on. I don't think anybody's trying to dwell on it or do different things like that. I think it's just tough, man. You got guys in and out lineups. That makes it even more difficult. But we're going to.
Who's in and out of the lineup?
I'm going to be here every night. Hey, as long as I can move around and try to play and do those different things, I'm going to fight through the adversity, and I'll be here and try to keep leading this group.
So you've got in Maxey, I would argue, a lot of what you had in Allen Iverson. You have a guy who is willing to put his body on the line and be in that lineup each and every night. Because he realizes that without him, this thing doesn't work. I mean, last night without Joel Embiid, it certainly didn't work. But he knows damn well, if he's not part of this, if he is not part of this lineup, there's zero chance of this team winning. I would even argue that you could have, if you gave me a 10-game set right now of no Joel Embiid, but Tyrese Maxey in the lineup, versus no Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid in the lineup, I would bet you the impact on the record is negligible. That's how important I think Tyrese Maxey is. In theory, you should say to yourself, if Embiid is healthy, he has been an MVP before, the Sixers should be able to go 7-3 in a 10-game stretch, something like that. And that if you don't have him, but you have Maxey, maybe you're a 500 team. No, I think it's a lot closer than that. Now, he mentioned you have guys in and out of the lineup, and that makes it harder. Paul George getting suspended, not helpful. Paul George better come back in the best shape of his life and like ready to just rip the hearts and souls out of the opposition to make up for lost time. And when Embiid is back, somebody needs to do a blessing. I don't know if we need to get like a priest, a deacon, a rabbi. I don't know what we need to do. I don't know if we need to like take him somewhere to like the old pagan gods or whatever. I don't think that's actually a good idea. Take him to a Buddhist temple. I don't know. Do a little sage thing around you. I don't know what you have to do. But in order for this team to be even remotely competitive, you need to have Maxey and Embiid in the lineup together. You get Paul George back, great. Hopefully, VJ Edgecombe, if he misses a game or two, hopefully he doesn't, but if he does, he'll bounce back. He's a young guy. He's a rookie. He should be okay. But it just sucks. To go from a point 2 weeks before the deadline where it felt like this Sixers team could actually compete for the 4th seed, maybe even the 3 seed in this conference, to watching them fall into what could be like the play-in game is a total disaster. I don't even know what the best course is, right? Like, on one hand, if you're a total psycho, you could try to make the case that it would be best for the Sixers to fall out of this thing and to try to get into the draft lottery. But you're not going to be able to fall nearly far enough to be able to make a leap. All right, right now the Sixers are 33-28. If they were to go on some kind of a terrible stretch, they've got 21 games left. Is Chicago going to make up an 8-game difference so that you can somehow end up in that top 10 of the draft lottery? I don't think so. So for the Sixers, you're kind of what you are. If you're the Sixers, you got to just hope that you can get everybody back in the lineup and healthy and give a team a scare or two in the postseason. I still stand resolute in the belief that if Embiid comes back and could be whatever healthy looks like for him, and Paul George comes back after the suspension, I still think that there is a path to the Sixers winning a playoff series, home court or not. But any hope of them getting beyond the first round feels largely unlikely, unless Joel Embiid is somehow going to be healthy, which he's never been. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. And it would be nice if you had a guy coming off the bench that could help your team out, like Jared McCain, except he's gone because Daryl Morey is a dolt. Okay. Now, there was one other little newsy bit around the Sixers, just really quickly. And this came up from Kevin O'Connor. And we'll throw this up here. Now, if you remember, there was that thought out there that Daryl Morey pitched this idea that the reason they traded Jared McCain was to get assets that they thought were going to be used to acquire a player. Well, according to Kevin O'Connor, good old KOC, formerly of The Ringer, and now at Yahoo, Daryl Morey was apparently trying to add Kawhi Leonard at the deadline. From Kevin O'Connor, quote, executives have said that the Sixers were actively making calls pre-deadline, though nothing seemed remotely close. Some sources suggest that Morey was star hunting with Kawhi Leonard being a name that was connected to Philly, but nothing happened. So Embiid, Maxey, and the team saw McCain get dealt, the tax get ducked, and no pieces brought in to help. Okay. Let's just say, hypothetically, Morey was really going after Kawhi. That would require you trading Paul George back for financial reasons. Paul George, who actively chose to leave the Clippers who actively chose not to give the deal to Paul George that he wanted, unless it was going to be a 3-team trade. So Daryl Morey thought, you know what's better than replacing an injured Paul George? Let's get Kawhi Leonard, who also can't stay healthy. Now, Kawhi is a significantly better player. He's still an elite player when he can be healthy, whatever the hell that is. You want to talk about Tyrese Maxey's frustration about guys being in and out of the lineup. Can you imagine having Kawhi and Embiid on the same team? Man, when they're healthy, hell of a team. Probably the best in the East. You'd get to see it like 8 games a year. But the thing that's damning in this report from Kevin O'Connor is that it says the Sixers were actively making calls pre-deadline, though nothing seemed remotely close. Which is why you can go back to James Harden, who once noted about Daryl Morey. And if you remember, he said Daryl Morey is a liar. Daryl Morey sat in front of the media after trading Jared McCain, the day after dealing McCain, and said, we thought we were close on something else. It didn't come to fruition. But we sold high on Jared McCain. And we've all gotten to watch Jared McCain now score more 20-point games, put together more 20-point games off the bench since being dealt by the Sixers than any other player in the NBA. We have seen that happen. We've watched Jared McCain's field goal percentage and three-point percentage jump. We have watched Jared McCain's point totals per game roughly double between playing with the Sixers and playing with the Thunder. We had to watch the president of the team say that he's confident that he sold high on Jared McCain. Nick Nurse says that he doesn't really keep up with what McCain is doing in Oklahoma City. The offense looks effectively like a bunch of dudes standing around at the YMCA saying, ISO. The Sixers don't even look like they have a functioning offense. It really, I mean, if you watch Sixers possessions, what is it, 60% of it? At least. It feels like at least. 60%. Let's see if Tyrese Maxey can cook his defender. Let's see if EJ Edgecombe can cook his defender. Let's see if Joel Embiid, when healthy, can cook his defender. Let's see if Paul George can cook his defender. That's it. That's the offense. Nick Nurse is a fraud. We have officially reached the point. Nick Nurse is a fraud. Nick Nurse won a championship due in large part, if not entirely, to Kawhi Leonard. Nick Nurse is not an elite coach. We can give him a little bit of grace. All right. Paul George got suspended. Joel Embiid's been in and out of the lineup. This team should still be better. One of two things has to happen, right? If you're a Sixers fan, and you're looking at this thing holistically, right? You have to make a determination. Was the roster ever good enough to compete? Was the roster ever good enough to be a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference? If the answer is no, then a lot of this falls at the feet of Daryl Morey. Going into the season, it felt like people thought Sixers had a legit chance to be a top 4 team. And when you put together Maxey, George, Embiid, no one knew that Edgecombe was going to be as good as he was. If you looked at this roster and said, yeah, they could be top 4, then it's not all on Daryl Morey. Then you have to look at the head coach. If the roster wasn't good enough, can you really blame the head coach if he can't put shit together? Maybe not. Maybe it's unfair. But if the roster was good enough, and I would argue that the roster when the season began was good enough to be a top 4 team in the East, especially with Boston not having Jason Tatum, well, then a lot has to fall at the feet of the head coach. I will also note, you can see in this league coaches that are able to overcome adversity. You can make a case right now that a team that the Sixers ran into recently, who have been without Jason Tatum all year, that coach, Joe Mazzulla, coaches laps around Nick Nurse. Laps. If you gave Joe Mazzulla this Sixers team, they would be in the top 3 right now in this conference. Because that's a guy who knows how to maximize his players. Nick Nurse doesn't know shit about shit. And he's smug. And he's not a very particularly likable dude on the mic when he talks to the media. And a lot of people could say that it doesn't matter how your head coach comes off to the media. It's about, does he do the job? I'd argue no. If I were the Sixers right now, I would be coming up with a plan to replace Daryl Morey and Nick Nurse this offseason. It doesn't matter how the season finishes. It doesn't matter if the bottom falls out and you end up in the lottery somehow. It doesn't matter if the bottom falls out and you end up in the play-in game. It doesn't matter if you get into the playoffs and lose in the first round. It doesn't matter if you get to the playoffs and win in the first round. You got to make some wholesale changes. This Jared McCain deal, among many other decisions that Daryl Morey has made in recent years, reason enough to move on. Nick Nurse not being able to figure out how to maximize any of these guys. You need to find a new coach. And the problem is, they probably won't do either. Will they fire the coach? Probably not. Will they fire the GM or the president, whatever the hell? Probably not. Because from an ownership standpoint, Daryl Morey did exactly what he was supposed to do. He avoided the tax. It's all bullshit, guys. And then when you see a report like this, the Sixers might have been star hunting, but nothing appeared even remotely close. That should tell you all you need to know about the guy who's running the show for the Sixers. Okay, I've had enough. I'm upset enough. Get off the Sixers. Shall we talk about the Philadelphia Flyers? We'll talk about them briefly, but I will note that tonight, down in Glassboro, on the campus of, or very close to the campus of Rowan University, Snow the Goalie radio begins at 6 o'clock at Chickies and Pete's. So we'll dive into the hockey talk a lot tonight at Chickies and Pete's in Glassboro, New Jersey. But I will note, Risto was not practicing yesterday. And I got multiple texts saying, oh boy, it's Risto season. It's Risto injury season time, baby. Not great. Not great. But it did come out. Risto's not really hurt. It was a maintenance day. Okay. Pierre LeBrun put out a report that the Flyers are looking for a first-round pick and a prospect, which I think is a fair ask for Risto coming off of the Olympics. I don't see a scenario where the Flyers decide they're going to move Risto for a second, right? They're going to stand resolute in this. They need a first. And if I were them, I would essentially try to get what you got for Scott Lawton. Get a first-round pick, and then try to get a guy who is in the minors, potentially, right? Get a guy who's Grebenkin-esque, who could maybe come up, maybe make your team, maybe have a really strong camp next year and surprise you and make the team. That would be great. That'd be swell. First-round pick and a prospect. Risto theoretically fits the bill for a lot of teams that think that they can make the playoffs and want to have a bigger presence on the blue line. Now, there was an update on a trade that people have been very interested in, and that is Robert Thomas, who plays for the St. Louis Blues. Darren Drager put out a thing a little bit ago, a few hours ago. We'll go over to this really quickly. This will kind of mark the end of our Flyers talk for today. But Darren Drager puts out, update, it's believed St. Louis and Buffalo went the distance on the Thomas trade talks. Sounds like the Sabres aren't willing to part with the necessary pieces, which includes prospects, a player, and a first. Still teams nibbling, but the Blues are firm in what the return needs to be for the young center. Now, I am not a big believer in Robert Thomas, a first-line center. I think he's a really, really good 2C. I tend to be right about guys that are looked at in that tweener category. I have a feeling Robert Thomas is a really, 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 really good 2C who could theoretically get some minutes on the top line and as coaches are juggling lineups, could play adequate minutes as a 1C. I don't believe that he is a bona fide stud 1C. But if you're talking about prospects and a player and a first, I threw this idea out on Snow the Goalie last week. I asked a very simple question. You know, let's just say you're building this thing out. And let's say that in order for this to work for the Flyers, you would have to include Jet Lachenko because they need a center to go back. Jet Lachenko and like Owen Tippett and at least a first, and then probably something else. Maybe it's an Oliver Bonk. Maybe it's a cupboard's kind of bare. You're not going to trade Martone. You're not going to trade Michkov. He's not a high-end enough player for either of those guys to be in the conversation. If Tippett and Lachenko and a first wouldn't be enough to get it done, do you consider trading Tyson Forster? Now, Forster was on a 40-goal pace. And Forster is a guy that this team really believes in. And Forster is a guy that Sidney Crosby, of all people, really believes in. But Forster's had injury concerns back-to-back years. And there is part of me that says, as much as it would suck to lose Forster, you do have a lot of wings. Martone is going to take a spot next year. You probably want to see Alex Bump at some point next year. And if there's not much of a trade market for Tippett, and Tippett becomes more of a power forward, do you look at Forster and say, as much as it hurts to move him, we would be getting a guy who would certainly be the Flyers' number 1C. And if they could ever acquire a legit 1C, then Robert Thomas becomes a really excellent 2C. Do you make that move? I got to be honest. I would probably make an offer that has Tyson Forster as the centerpiece of the trade. Does Forster and a first alone get it done? Does Forster and Lachenko get it done? Does Forster, Lachenko, and a first get it done? Is there a conditional pick that needs to happen? I mean, here you go. Adam Glickus says, Dvorak, Thomas, Coots, Zegras. They don't view Zegras as a center, which I think is a mistake. Like, that fixes a lot if Zegras is a center. But okay, if they're going to have him play wing, and you have to look at this, Cates, you're looking at Dvorak, Thomas, Cates, and Coots. Couturier should probably be your 4C, just based on his play, unfortunately, but the reality is reality. Cates is probably your 3C, Dvorak's your 2C, Thomas would be your 1C. It's not a stellar group of centers, but it is a group of centers that can be 200-foot players. Now, Couturier is a very slow 200-foot player, but you would theoretically have guys that can be strong up the middle. I think that it's worth a conversation. If for no other reason than if you really do worry about Forster's health and whether or not he's going to be an injury-prone player, I think you have to have that conversation. We'll talk about that tonight on Snow the Goalie. All right, last thing I want to get to. So Bryce Harper's with Team USA. Bryce Harper looks like a totally different man because he's got Aaron Judge hitting behind him. And so I got thinking a little bit. I thought to myself, Harper is probably going to be a malcontent much of this season until Dave Dombrowski somehow goes out and gets another human being in here to hit behind him. They need a right-handed bat. Now, Adolis Garcia could end up being a good power threat, but I'm not going to set exponentially higher expectations on Garcia than I had for Castellanos. If he becomes an absolute slugging force, well then cool. You can have Harper hit third, have Garcia hit fourth. We all feel great about it. But my question is, like, conceptually, couldn't you figure out a way to have Schwarber hit behind Harper so that Harper gets better pitches to hit? And I don't know who you have hit after Schwarber. That is the problem, right? Like, no matter what, you don't have that next guy up. Alec Boehm is not that guy. Turner can't be that guy. Crawford, no. This actually does come back to why it was such a mistake for the Phillies that they didn't go after a guy like Bregman, why they didn't seal the deal with Bichette. Having one of those guys in the lineup would all of a sudden change the calculus on the lineup. But anyway, Harper seems like a totally happy guy now that he's playing with Team USA. But there is one last little bit of news and notes that we had to talk about here before we head out. It was mentioned the other day, and then it did come to fruition. Poor Johan Rojas. Poor Johan Rojas. He's facing an 80-game suspension. And if you remember the other day, the thought was, oh, is this a World Baseball Classic thing that he failed a test for, which is why people were like, oh, maybe it's marijuana. No, he's facing an 80-game suspension for performance-enhancing drugs. So I just want to note really quickly, the Phillies in like the last 6 months or so have now seen two of their outfielders who largely underwhelmed test positive for performance-enhancing drugs. And that doesn't even include Jose Alvarado, who claims that he was taking like a weight loss drug. The Phillies had Max Kepler, whose performance was not enhanced by whatever drugs he took, and Johan Rojas, who certainly did not have his performance enhanced by drugs or any other substance. I just want to ask really quickly, what the hell is going on with the Phillies? That's now 3 players in the last calendar year, right? 3 players get dinged for performance-enhancing drugs. There is a potential loss of control, lack of institutional control with the Phillies. I would be deeply concerned. It was one thing when it was Alvarado and he said he was trying to lose weight. Not the best excuse, but okay. And it's another thing when you find out, for whatever reason, Max Kepler was doing a performance-enhancing drugs and it didn't work. But now to see Rojas also have this happen, nah, there's a problem. There's a systemic issue now. 3 players in a year. Can't happen. And again, Dave Dombrowski, you're overseeing this whole thing. You had a shitty offseason, and now you have 3 players who have tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. I could argue that is a loss of institutional control. And perhaps maybe Mr. Dave Dombrowski should find himself on the hot seat, just like Daryl Morey, just like Nick Nurse. We'll see. All right, I got to go. I'll be back on Friday. I'll talk to a lot of you tonight over on Snow the Goalie Radio. Again, 6 o'clock, Chicks and Pete's in Glassboro, New Jersey. And I think we're back. There's a game tomorrow, right? There's a Flyers game at the Xfinity Mobile Arena on Thursday. So Press Row Show over on the Snow the Goalie channels. And if you're not going to check those out, or even if you are, don't forget, we'll be back here at 10 a.m. on Friday with the Russ Joy Show. Until then, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. I hope all of you have a wonderful Wednesday, and I'll talk to each and every one of you Friday here on the Russ Joy Show. Bye now.